Right, so we got ourselves another knife video, and this is the highly coveted Woodlore Pro. So this knife is basically a evolution on from the original Woodlore knife, designed by Ray Mears. Ray Mears designed this, I believe, in 2015, 2016, something like that, and originally it was made by Stephen Wade Cox, who sadly passed away in 2016. He made about 60 of these before his death, and since then they've become highly prized collector's pieces. Not this one so much, because this isn't made by Stephen Wade Cox or branded Woodlore. However, John at Nomad Knives, he told me upon receiving this knife that this was an original Stephen Wade Cox blank that he'd managed to acquire. I think he'd inherited some blades from Stephen after Stephen's sad passing. And yeah, so this is one of the finished articles that John had finished himself. The same black micarta handle as the original. We've got stainless, loveless bolts, red liners. One of the interesting things about this knife that sets it apart from the original Woodlore is the taper. You can see here the blade stock material starts off at 5mm, and then as it gets down towards the tip, just before the plunge lines, we've got a 3.8mm. On the tang, we've got even more of an appropriate taper, so from 5mm down to about 3mm. This makes the knife quite lively in the hand. It's nice and balanced. When I first picked this up, it was one of those things where you just kind of like, ooh, that feels nice, you know what I mean? And after using it, I like it more than I wanted to. Originally I just kind of looked at it and I thought, oh, it's just another 01 knife, I could probably make something like that, but even still, it might just be an 01, but it's got an absolutely banging heat treat, and just the handling of it is great. Other changes from the original Woodlore, you've probably noticed the height of that grind. So what we have there is a huge Scandi grind. It's a 25 degree, and the edge is convexed, as all high Scandi grinds should be, because having a 0 Scandi grind, it will just break or chip whenever you're using it on anything that's not just cutting butter. As you can see as well, and something that I was very happy about, is that Ray Mears decided to make the point a lot slimmer. You know, so you can actually use it for bushcraft tasks. So many knives these days that you see are just completely overbuilt monsters with thick blades and giant spear point tips, and when you're actually getting down to it and actually having to carve something, having a small tip like that is so advantageous compared to a big brute pry bar with an edge. So yeah, this knife, I guess, encompasses strength with the thick blade, but also a bit of finesse. Interesting thing about distal tapers is, despite having a thinner point, they do actually add strength, because they balance the load of any flex over the knife. So they basically mean that there's no hinge points in the centre where it could break. So if you're using something with a distal taper, and I do it on a lot of my knives as well, the convex grinds, it actually does help with the strength. So the only weak point in your blade really is going to be the very tip, and that is a very fine tip. So I have actually rounded it off a little bit just on the very tip, just because I like to use my knives and I didn't want to break it. The handle was pretty much the same as any other Woodlore. It's your classic Woodlore Coke bottle style handle. Not many changes there, apart from obviously the change in handle material to being black micarta, which I believe is a superior material. It's grippy when it's wet, you can get it covered in blood, it's not going to soak up things, it's not going to shrink and warp. And one of my gripes with full tang knives has always been, especially when you have a wooden handle, is the scale shifting and sort of warping, and you can feel like a ridge there in between your static metal and your non-stable scale material. So using a composite material like this just eliminates that problem. You're going to get some patina up there as it's 01, but as it's polished 01, not too much corrosion. I personally, I'm alright with patinas, they look quite nice. And if you're actually going to use a tool, just accept that it will get dirty and beaten up over time. Right, so enough talking about it, let's use the thing, let's see how useful it is for making a fire. thing with cedar, it's just like sometimes does not want to split. We've got that knot there, so let's drive it through that. So you can see as well, because of the taper in the tang and the knot right in the centre of that cedar, it's trying to kind of push the blade backwards, so we're having to counter that. Smacking the wood back on. So what I might do with that is get that out and just come in round the other side. There we go. Oh, for those of you who are wondering why I'm just cutting up bits of wood, I'm not just cutting up bits of wood. We're going to rub one out, we're going to make a bow drill fire. So no more of that making feather sticks and striking it with a ferrocerium rod. We're going to see how this thing does, doing the whole thing from scratch. This thing actually does slice very nicely. It bites in really cleanly, very easy to control. So you can see how using a fine tip like this just makes delicate little jobs, like carving a Beaujolais notch, much easier. In fact, it's an absolute pleasure to use this tool. So the Woodlore Pro did really well on all of those tasks. Absolute joy to use. We're going to see now if we can get this fire going, if we can rub one out, by which I mean fire by friction. The set we have here is cedar on cedar, so it shouldn't take too long to get an ember going, but it is a really hot day and I don't want to be burning too much longer. So let's give it a go. There we go. Got ourselves a little ember. So am I sold on the Woodlore Pro? Would I pay full whack for the Ray Mears version? No, I wouldn't. But that comes down to who you are really at the end of the day. Some people will pay, you know, the asking price, which I believe is just under £600, because of the value of it. It's going to increase. It's got the name, it's got the brand. I personally don't care about that. I just want a knife that works, that, you know, is a pleasure to use. Will a Mora do everything this knife can do? Absolutely yes. Do you need a knife like this to perform bushcraft skills well and with ease? No, you don't. But at the end of the day, knives and these sort of things, with a lot of us in this kind of scene, we just like them and we like trying new ones out. And so far I'm really enjoying using this. Flaws that I can think of with this knife, it's a bit awkward with batoning sometimes because of that taper. Sometimes it tends to like go to the path of least resistance on the wood when you're splitting it, which is inevitably the tip. So the blade will actually ride back out. But that's only when going through seriously hard knotty bits. As far as just batoning and splitting like fairly simple pieces of wood, it's never been an issue. And to be honest, with those hard knotty bits, you'd be better off with an axe. The point of manipulation, i.e. the spine, is nice and close to the edge, so you've got a lot of control over it. The balance point is wonderful. When I first picked up this knife I thought, wow, it's got a lovely balance, it's got a lovely feel in the hand. You know, it's very confident feeling grip. And just outstanding slicer. This thing will process wood very efficiently. It's yeah, it's a hell of a woodworking tool, and I can see why Ray Mears designed this or changed from the original design as to what this one is. It's a lovely piece of kit. Another thing that's worth putting into consideration, edge retention. We've just used this thing to carve a Beaujolais set. So, is it still sharp? Yeah. Yeah, the edge retention is excellent. The heat treat on this piece of 01 is brilliant. I haven't found any edge flaws or edge problems from hard use or anything like that. It's tough stuff, it's good stuff. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Woodlore Pro. Not the Woodlore version of it, but you know, it's kind of basically exactly the same thing. And I'm really enjoying using it and giving it a good beating.